Okay, hi guys, good to see you here. So we are going to go into the fifth clue and then also review 1 to 4 to see where we are. I have put a poll in chat. If you don't know what the clues are, and obviously you don't know what number 5 is, you might want to hold off voting until sort of later on in this, right? I must also kind of apologize beforehand. I'm extremely tired. I just had pretty poor quality sleep the last session. And I was thinking, should I have a nap and then do the live? But I kind of just want to get through it and then, grab a pillow. So if I'm a little bit like, I seem a bit fuzzy and woozy, it's not because I've had 5 beers, it's just because I'm a little bit sleep deprived. While we're waiting for a couple of people to come into chat, I want to share something with you that was really kind of really bizarre. I walked my dog this evening, much later than I normally do. It's sort of that time where there's just a little bit of light left. The sun has actually gone down long ago, and anyway, I was coming to the end of the walk, and I swear I looked up and I saw. I've kind of first thought, I know as crazy as it sounds, that looks like a train in the air, right? Because it was a row of lights, not like 3 lights or 4 lights, maybe 30 lights, kind of in a string. It kind of looked exactly like a train in the air. Anyway, I'll at the end of this live remind me to come back to it, and we'll just talk about what that was. It definitely was bizarre. Definitely was bizarre. Tony Smith says nothing makes sense. Police supposedly spent 2 weeks searching. I don't know why you say that doesn't make sense. Sometimes haven't you ever lost your car keys and they were in the most obvious place, but you also couldn't find them? Not sure why it doesn't make sense. Shady's intervention says it's a Starlink satellite. Do they look like that? Lots of little lights next to one another. It is Starlight Express. Does it look like that? Sharon Tuck, good to see you here. Starlink satellites. Really? Before I move on, I'm just so curious. I want to just see if I can see what that looks like. Oh, yeah, there it is. Jeepers. So that's what I saw. That is what I saw. Well, some of you guys are clearly very well informed. Well done. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. That really is, yeah. So Ramblin' Rome, have you seen the same thing? We see the Starlink a lot over Montana. Zenaida Rivera, good to see you. Empath Test says, I can't remember the clues. Well, we are going to review them here. Okay, so before we get started with that, I want to just bring up this image on the right-hand side here. Something that I think is quite interesting is the burn patches. And I can't tell whether these are burn patches or whether they're patches of grass. Are there real burn patches over here? That's something I would like confirmed. Verna said that she saw burn patches, but when her vehicle passed by it very close by, what I saw looked like a patch of grass, but maybe it was something I didn't see. I just wonder, is that, for example, over there, is that a burn patch over there? Is that a burn patch? Is that a burn patch? The other thing that's interesting with this vertical view is you can see that this area sort of doubles as a parking area. In fact, when they retrieved Kylie's vehicle, do you remember all the vehicles that were parked up here? And one just wonders, was there a second party zone sort of over here? Because you would think this might make quite a cool place to have a party. You make a bonfire and you've got a nice view of the water. And I'm just asking, is that something we don't know about the party that went on? Okay. Nicola Locus says it's sage grass. That's what I thought from seeing the video. Looks like small pieces of sage grass. Ramblin' Rome says impromptu campfires. Yeah, I would just like to know if any of this is definitely a burn patch. I mean, you can imagine that someone might want to do that. Yeah, and for couples to slink off to. Yeah, small campfires. So that's just another area where there's a little bit of uncertainty. The tire tracks were gone. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to kind of get going with the fifth clue, but we're going to build up to it by going through 4 others. So over the past day or two, several creators, I know I'm not the only one, have homed in on the same thing, Kylie's route to the water. Some of them kind of retraced it at night, and some of them, I know this channel, retraced the route during the day. And the whole idea was just to ask, what did it look and feel like? And one wonders whether law enforcement retraced the route in a similar vein, actually going out and practically driving it and kind of being in the mindset of think like a teenager. Did they drive it as Kylie as a teenager? Or did they simply think, well, maybe, like looked at a map and said, well, maybe she went that way? I think it's a little bit different when you simulate it to get a sense of what is likely. Does that make sense? I think a lot of you, when you watch that footage, thought about it in a different way. I think it's totally different thinking about the route in theory and actually driving it. Some said that, I think someone who drove it said, even sober, I think driving at night would be kind of dangerous, kind of risky. So in terms of this episode, this will be the final analysis of clues and details we either overlooked or underestimated in the search for Kylie Rodney. In this analysis, we're going to cover some misconceptions related to weather and ambient light, as well as review all 5 clues to say, which one was more on target, kind of thing. So as we move into the analysis for clue number 5, I want you to see not how quickly you can guess what number 5 is, but how slowly. Let me say that again. So we're going to do the review, clues 1, 2, 3, 4. As we sort of start moving into number 5, I want you to see not how quickly you can guess what number 5 is, but how slowly. I know it's a bit of reverse psychology there. The whole idea is that you sort of practice the scout mindset, which is don't assume you know, assume you don't know. Stay curious, like that kind of attitude. Stephanie, good to see you here. Alan Gregory says there would be wood logs there, at least remnants. You would think so. Soybean says lots of potholes and dirt. Okay, so try to keep an open mind about what you think number 5 is. It's good practice because a major lesson in this case, in the search for Kylie Rodney, was about keeping an open mind, at least in my opinion. The idea is that you keep an open mind, but also know which information to prioritize. That's kind of the difference between great investigator and a sort of average or good one. You have your mind open to more possibilities. And I think what I've just mentioned at the beginning of this, where I said, I saw something tonight and I wasn't sure what it is, right? If you make up your mind, because the human brain hates uncertainty, if you make up your mind, then you actually stop the ability to kind of be open to new information. So you can kind of have a bias or an idea, but it's always good to nevertheless keep an open mind. It's always good to almost acknowledge that uncertainty. So, as I said, we're going to start with a review of the first 4 clues before we dig into the context and fabric around the 5th. So, do you guys remember what the first clue was? Let's just test your knowledge. Do you guys remember what the first clue was? Sunflower says, I thought it was illegal to have fires. Lou May says, I'd be interested to research what the moon phase was that night. That's exactly what we're going to do. V. Jones says, they said they saw no tire tracks. If everyone was parked there, come on. Well, V. Jones, if you look at the terrain, it's quite hard. If you look at this sort of area here, it's quite hard sand. Cal Girl says, I'm going to fail this test. My memory is terrible. Sleuth and Sandal says, Nick from AWP in a recent interview mentioned that there would be a lot of fallout. I think he said heavy stuff. That was his words, unless I'm thinking about a different one. Stephanie says the ping. Stephanie, I think you haven't. I think you. Yeah. Well, it's a good guess. It has to do with the phone. Ali Berry says, if you have made up your mind that situation X was definitely caused by action B, you're going to be stuck in a loop of confirmation bias. I think a really good example in true crime of that is the JonBenet Ramsey case, where you feel like there are only so many possibilities, and then you kind of get caught in a confirmation bias and you can't kind of get out of it. Pauline Buckle says one of the clues was the park rules, no noise after 10 p.m. That's right. That is right. Good point, girly girl. Where is her phone? Okay, so Soybean says last ping of her phone. I must say, when I went back to it myself, I thought, yeah, it was about the ping. So I was quite surprised and disappointed in a way that it wasn't. So the number 1 clue I highlighted was Kylie's phone. I don't know if you remember, the first title image was that classic image of Kylie in the black dress on that sort of jetty with the arrow pointing to her phone and it being circled. So I think that part at least was right. I wish I could say I focused on the ping. Instead of concentrating on the ping, I concentrated on the phone going off. That to me was what's the word? That was something that resonated intertextually. There were other cases where phones go off and then someone comes to grief. So I actually saw the phone going off as pointing to foul play. That was how I first conceived of it. And so I suggested, was Kylie in the habit of turning off her phone or allowing the battery to run down? If she wasn't, I thought it might be a sign of foul play. And you can evaluate for yourself how accurate that ultimately was. You can also evaluate for yourself to say, is that thinking going to help you find Kylie? Yes or no? What do you guys think? So in terms of the phone going off, the ping seemed irrelevant, I guess, because of the call at 12:36. So if you had a ping and then a call at 12:36 that apparently occurred after the ping to Sammy, and this call to Sammy seemed to locate Kylie outside of her vehicle and at the party. And so do you guys agree this discrepancy still needs to be explained? Stephanie says her mother said she wouldn't have let her phone die when she had a charger in her car, but seems she may have not have charged it very long. Yeah, that's a sensible comment. Soybean says that, and ping was the same time the party goers left. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first one. The second clue was brought to my attention by Terry Dean, who went to the Prosser campground, and I thought it was an excellent observation because it provided a possible explanation for why the party suddenly ended. What was the reason why all these seniors simultaneously just seemed to stop partying and leave, right? Was it because it was a pre-planned sort of phase one, phase two party slash after party, or was there some event that took place that caused everyone to leave? So, so I thought Terry's observation there provided at least a potential answer to this. The only problem was Terry at this point was under the impression the party was at the Prosser campground, right, which isn't here. Sorry, not here. It's yeah, it's kind of closer to the boat ramp area, and it's not in a separate area some distance away known as the sanctuary, right? So I wasn't 100% clear right in the beginning. To me, it was like there was a party at the Prosser campground, and the reality is, yes, there was a party, and it was in the sort of larger Prosser Reservoir area, but in a specific designated area called the Sanctuary, which is not for camping. So I thought what had happened was these partygoers had gone there, flouted the rules, and someone had come and complained and chased them away. That turned out to be not accurate. Of course, we don't know whether this party was like the Michigan party, where cars were spinning donuts and making a huge racket. But one would imagine if they were, that would have made it into the narrative. Someone would have said, something like that. Nancy says 12:30 a.m. mass exodus, big red flag. Okay, and so that brings us to the third clue. Do any of you remember what the third clue referred to? Is Julie here? Yeah, the sticker on her phone said sex wax. That is something you put on surfboards. Kaylin says, I think the last ping was after she went into the water, damaging her phone. It's odd how Sammy stated the last time they spoke and when Kylie's phone went off. Pauline says going to a charter school isolated from other seniors. That's 100% right. Bria says it's a very common sticker on the West Coast. Yeah, so the third clue was all about Kylie feeling isolated, either because of being homeschooled or because of where she lived, or both. But the whole idea that that's why she ended up alone. That's why she ended up leaving all by herself. as a potential explanation. Maybe there could be another explanation. So I actually think of the 3 clues highlighted, this was by far the most pertinent at that point. If she did drive to the reservoir, she did so alone. She attended a party and was left alone to make her way home. Her age and to some extent home circumstances meant her connections to other kids were different, which counted against her. So I think my thought is that the 3rd clue was getting us somewhere in terms of, prior to finding Kylie. It was giving us a sense of how Kylie is different to the other seniors. Okay, do you remember what the 4th clue referred to? Soybean says older girls giving her a hard time, or older boys giving her not a hard time, sort of paying attention to her. That's also possible. She would have been, I think, quite different to the other seniors. Bear in mind, like I remember when I was a senior at my school, how can I put it? Let me just put it this way. I found it more enjoyable going to senior parties where I was older than the girls. I didn't really find it that great when you were the same age, because you felt like they preferred older guys. I don't know. So when I was a senior, and later on when I was a bit older, because I went to a couple of senior dances and so on, when I was in university, I enjoyed it when I was a bit older. So I wonder whether Kylie being younger made her in a way more attractive to some of the boys that were seniors, not the college boys, the boys that were seniors. Does that make sense? Again, I think one's got to think about older guys, a creeptastic time. I think one's got to think like a teenager, Lena says Kylie was young, secluded, and naive. Okay, do you guys remember what the 4th clue referred to? Gertie Girl says it's really sad that she could have still been alive if she just went to the car show. Yeah, as easy as that. It's almost like you turn that way and you will live, and you turn that way and you won't. You decide, I'm going to do this, and you live, and you decide that and you don't. It's a horrible thought to think that life can be so, what's the word? It can turn on a dime in a way. Emmy says, I was a young senior too. I mean, I turned 17 in my final year. So I was definitely pretty young. I think there were guys who turned 19 in that same year. Cosmic Kate, cool name. Teenagers are easily impressed. Stephanie says her social media, Instagram and Snapchat. 100%. You didn't go and check, did you, Stephanie? Someone says guys are wary of a minor. Could be. SM Kovalinsky, good to see you. Says that struck me as well about the car show. Okay, so the number 4 clue was about Kylie's identity in general. That was sort of the approach I took, was basically, let's find out more about her. And it's sort of, how do you find out about someone? You look at their friends, you look at their social media, you look at their self-identifying statements, right? You look at their photos and selfies and see how they present themselves. So I was trying to find out about her identity in general, but her social media in particular. Although I took a roundabout route, by the end, I did highlight her Snapchat as well as this key data set from the timeline. And that's this. So I'm quite pleased that this was before Kylie was found. I highlighted this in the clue number 4. Some of you may not believe me. You might say, well, I don't remember clue number 4 coming out before Kylie was found, but it was published on Patreon on Saturday, August 21st, literally almost exactly 24 hours before, in terms of my local time and the local time in California. It was published shortly before midnight, my local time. The vehicle was found at 2:48 p.m. Pacific time, which is about 24 hours and 21 minutes after I posted it. Now you might say, so what? But to me, it's always a challenge as a true crime channel and someone who aspires to be an authentic voice in true crime, a truthful, genuine, truth teller. So you are trying to, intuit and figure out things. All I'm saying is it's a personal challenge, it's a test to me. And so if I'm going to think of myself as credible and that I've got a contribution to make, then you want to make certain breakthroughs or have certain intuitions before the time. It doesn't really help in hindsight. It doesn't help the police find something and you say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It makes all the sense where you don't know what the answer is and you try and figure it out, right? I mean, if you think about a lot of these cases, you start off with the same situation as law enforcement. You've got a very narrow set of circumstances, and what does it mean? And the challenge is increasingly to try and thin slice, in other words, to know the best, the most with the least. But at the same time, you don't want to be rushing that process. It's one thing to thin slice, it's another to go, well, this is a race. I've got to get there first. When you do that, I'm not sure that's going to be effective in terms of investigating, in terms of YouTube and the economics of YouTube. I'm sure it's very good to do it that way. But in terms of investigating in a systematic way, accurate way, I'm not sure if that's the best approach. So of the 4 clues, which ones do you think brought us the closest to getting on track, right? Number 1 was the phone going off. Number 2 was the campsite, the rules dealing with the campsite, saying that you've got to stop noise between, I think, 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So I think that one is clearly was not applicable in the end, but had potential. Thought it seemed to have a potential. Number 3 was that Kylie was isolated. I think that one's certainly better than number 2, maybe a tie with number 1. But I personally think number 4 was the best of the 4, because it does deal with this Snapchat ping, right? The other thing that it dealt with was the possible, the possible conversation that Kylie may have had on social media with someone that ultimately may have been with her right at the end or something, right? And so one thing I was entertaining at this late stage was based on her own social media and the lyrics of a song that she liked, where it was about running away. She was also wearing that hoodie that said something about disappearing. I just wondered, could she have wanted to run away, or maybe not run away, but just sort of not go home that night, kind of thing. And so that was another thought. And what's quite interesting is some people now are wondering whether Kylie maybe was depressed or something. I don't believe that, but what's interesting about that is the thoughts are turning to Kylie making a bad decision, or Kylie being emotional in some way and doing something that got herself into trouble. Bear in mind, she's idiosyncratically young compared to all of these other kids. And so I think that the thinking that she was really depressed and she maybe took her own life, although I don't agree with that, I do think it's better thinking than saying some third party came along and did something, in my personal opinion. I think that is also coming close to her driving under the influence, but also under the misconception that it was safe to do that. The one is like, I intend to not be safe and to come to harm. The other one is, I don't want to come to harm, but I'm also not alert enough to realize just how dangerous what I'm doing is. But the thing is, the onus is now moving towards Kylie and her thoughts and her ideas and her perceptions, right? And I think all of the latest footage and the latest things a lot of creators have been doing, saying, what was the weather like? What was the light conditions like? Was the moon up? What did she experience when she drove? You're now actually putting yourself into Kylie's shoes in a way. And I think that is exactly what needs to be done. And that, in a way, was also part of the job of the fourth clue, was trying to figure her out. Like, who is this girl? How would she think about things? Diane Breed says, have they found her phone in the vehicle? That would be huge. We don't know. Answer, unknown. We don't know yet. Okay, so now we're going to deal with the fifth clue. Are you guys familiar with this term, Occam's razor? Do you guys know what that means? So again, just to remind you guys, the whole idea when we go through the fifth clue is try and not make up your mind what the fifth clue is for as long as you possibly can, right? Instead of trying to figure it out very early on, try and not do that. So obviously, this is the only clue. The fifth clue I wrote after the vehicle was found. So it's based on the eventual outcome. It's also based on hindsight. But what I think it shows is, when searching for a missing person, apply the principle of Occam's razor. Occam's razor means the simplest of competing theories is to be preferred, right? And so kind of shall I bring that up a bit so you can see it? Let's do it like that. So briefly, what that means is the simplest explanation is usually the most likely rather than the most complex. In this case, the car accident versus a Mean Girls cover-up, right? Let me say that again. The simplest explanation is usually the most likely rather than the most complex. In this case, the simplest explanation is a car accident. The most complex is like a Mean Girls, like not just one, several like jealous individuals who are part of some elaborate scheme, and then they also cover everything up, and presumably some of the 300 are aware of this and they keep the secret as well. Let's say it's a conspiracy of 50 people, possibly. That's definitely a more complicated scenario. Alan Gregory says accident is the most plausible. Karen Davis says simple explanations. Aging Hippie says, I've heard of Occam's razor, might not have spelt it right. Yeah, it's OCCAM. Yeah, Susan Smith says a concept discussed in the movie The Usual Suspects. T in Texas, I think. First time contributor. Have you noticed her countenance? Some of her expressions seem like she's sad. Tax cut says the most simple answer is most likely to be accurate. Yeah, I think it's the same thing Spock would say. Okay, so now let's start dealing with the number 5 clue. So I'm going to take you through a couple of steps, right? I'm going to take you through a couple of steps, and I'm not going to tell you how many steps there are. You might think there are 6 steps, but they could be 4. There could also be 3. There could also be just 2. So again, think about, is this the big thing that we didn't think about, right? But try not to decide that. Try and, or put it this way, try and choose your timing when you decide that, yes, that is actually the thing we needed to think about. But do it later rather than sooner. Okay, so here we go. Now we're going to deal with the moon. So I've first got to just say, I've heard a lot of people telling me about how brightly lit the campsite was, what the moon phase was, all these sort of things. And I got the distinct impression they were repeating information they got somewhere else, not something they checked themselves. And that's why you've got to have the scout mindset, right? You've got to, don't assume you know, assume you don't know, right? When you assume you don't know, you go and check. You go and check the information. So let's talk about the moon phases. So here they are. There they are. Let's do that. Okay. So there you can see 5th of August. That's California, USA 2022. 5th of August. And the first quarter moon started at 6 minutes past 4, obviously in the morning, on the 5th of August. And we know what happened to Kylie happened at the end of the 5th of August, going into the early morning of the 6th of August, right? So we've already got a bit of information. It looks like the moon was in its first quarter, which is basically a half moon scenario, right? So the assumption you draw is you say, oh, so there was a half moon when all of this happened. Wouldn't that be enough illumination, right? Cosmic Kate says clouds cover the moon possibly. Yeah, but even if you do have clouds, the moon can still be quite bright. And also, you must bear in mind this is California, and it's in the middle of a drought. So are there going to be a lot of clouds? The cloud cover is a good point. Zenaida Rivera, thanks very much. Thanks for that. Nice hat. Stephanie, am I missing someone? Roses are red 54. Did I trying to see if there's something I'm supposed to see? Okay, well, I'm not sure if there's something I'm missing. Julie says, I will have to withhold my vote because I just now joined. You will have to. Okay, so there are those who seem to think Kylie didn't simply drive into the reservoir, and she didn't because the area was illuminated by moonlight. In other words, she couldn't have driven in there because it was obvious. It was obvious that there's the water, there's the sloping of the land or whatever. It's not a terrible explanation, but as it turns out, it doesn't really matter whether the moon was full, supermoon, waxing gibbous, waning crescent, right? Why? Because the moon's set occurred just before Kylie was set to leave, right? In the same way that you get sunrise and sunset, you also get moonrise and moonset. And so it turns out that the moon set literally a couple of minutes, literally 5 or 6 minutes before Kylie left. That is, if she left at the time of that final ping. But the point is, if she left any time later, if she left then or any time later, it would have been dark. The moon would not have illuminated. So on August 6th, unluckily for Kylie, the first quarter moon set at 26 minutes past midnight, arguably as little as 5 to 10 minutes before the crash may have happened at the earliest. Have you guys seen that information anywhere else? Have you guys seen that information anywhere else? It's just, I'm just going to put that up like that. Like that, okay. Okay, Timmy, just don't knock over my coffee. Okay, so we get that information by being curious, by saying, you know what, I don't think I know the answer, let's go and have a look. If you don't believe me, if you think, well, how did you get that information? Well, you just go here, right? So let me bring this up. So can you see, it says moonrise, moonset, and there you can see moonset 0026. That's on the 6th of August. Do you see that? Thanks a lot, someone's goat. Appreciate it. Yeah, Timmy is a schnauzer. Purple Passion, Timmy is a schnauzer. Leah Simpson says, my weather app tells me. Okay. Timmy, are you a helpful schnauzer? Okay, so Timmy actually met a dog that was, can you guys see Timmy? Timmy actually met a dog for the first time that I think was more boisterous and energetic than him. So he definitely met his match. So can you see the sun sets, the moon sets at 26 minutes past midnight and then would only rise at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon of the 6th of August, right? And I believe this information comes from Weather Underground. So if you think that it's probably not true, you're welcome to go to Weather Underground. But you can just also search moonrise August 6th, California, 2022. Susan Smith says, and what is the temperature of the water? That I can't tell you. Leah Simpson says, it's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, it is. I've got to tell you, I've, in the course of writing quite a few true crime books, including in the Madeleine McCann case, I had to go and check what the moon situation was like. It was the Madeleine McCann case. I went to Praia de Luz. I was outside the apartment on the 3rd of May, on the anniversary, like at 9:30 at night to try and figure out at what time does it get dark there. So these are really quite important questions. The same with Chris Watts. You know, how dark was it? You know, was the wind, was the moon shining? It's quite when cases happen at night, you kind of do want to know where the moon was quite often. But I don't know if you've you've realized now the moon is totally irrelevant to this discussion because it had set. It's set kind of at the critical time, unfortunately. You could actually argue that had the moon not set when it did that night, Kylie would have been alive. That's another way of looking at it. Did the airbags deploy? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Okay. So do you guys agree the moon isn't a relevant factor, meaning the moon being up and providing illumination? In other words, the fact that it was dark doesn't mean anything. The fact that she was somewhat intoxicated, it would have been just like, almost like riding in daylight. That argument doesn't hold. So now we're going to come to the next thing, which deals with rain. So how many of you feel that rain is could be a significant factor here? Farm Girl says, I took a wrong turn on a road I travel often after an exhausting work marathon. No alcohol. It was dark and I was tired. Ellen says, YouTube video showed same route at night, pitch black. So that's this, right? This isn't really pitch black though, but it certainly is pretty damn dark. You certainly can't tell that there's water there. I don't actually know what time this was taken. Anyway. Heather Boland says, nice to see you live from Canada. Good to see you. So Zircon says, covering car tracks if rain. Karen Davis says, rain could be important. Robbie Robbins says, rain on windscreen, very poor visibility. Holly Golaki says, was it raining? Well, that's the question. Was it raining? Okay, so that's the question we now want to answer. So the rain aspect is definitely interesting, and I may have heard more rumors around rain than the moon. The rain idea is interesting for a few reasons. Firstly, it could explain how or why tracks going into the reservoir may have been washed away. Secondly, it could explain how the vehicle slipped down a wet or muddy slope to begin with and tumbled into the water. It also appears there was significant rain in parts of America during August. And so I'm going to show you guys this particular news story. Let's do that. And just bring it a bit down. This is quite interesting. On the anniversary of Gabby Petito, you actually had lots of rain in Yosemite. This is Yosemite. And this was just a couple of days ago. Flash floods wreak havoc in US Southwest, but are no salve for drought. So let me ask you guys a question. Was it raining? You can answer yes or no. Do you think it was raining? So Nicola Locus says it was not raining that night. Nicola, do you think it may have rained another night? Susie says no. Holly Golightly says no. PB&Q says rain could have been the reason for the mass exodus. Yeah, it could have, but was it? Okay, so Bria says Werner said it rained the following night. Not that night, but the next night. Okay. So this news report that you see over here is from the 24th of August, 2 days after Kylie's vehicle was recovered. So this isn't really relevant given the timeline. It's not really relevant. Although I can't say with absolute certainty because weather is variable from station to station, but it appears there was no rain for the entire month of August in the Truckee-Tahoe region. Now, here is the proof of that. So this is from Weather Underground. This graph here at the top gives you temperature. That middle line there is average, I think. That's maximum, that's minimum. Now, if you go down a little bit below that, this is precipitation, and that line is not precipitation, that is average precipitation. And so because there's not even a line yet, it means that there was zero precipitation in August, for the entire month of August in that region, right? So Ronald Pay says, but how much rain has fallen? Well, the answer is none. So according to this data, now bear in mind, this is from a weather station. Their job is to measure rain. They didn't measure any for the entire month, not the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, at no point. At no point. So I don't really know what to say about that, because I've heard people saying it did rain. So does that mean it rained at Prosser, or does it mean it rained nearby, but not necessarily Truckee? What does it mean? Or does it mean that data is not accurate? But according to Weather Underground, which is quite credible, there wasn't any rain whatsoever. PB&Q said police said it did rain during their search. Well, how do you explain that? How do you explain that it doesn't show any rain there? Suppose it's possible if they went quite far afield to maybe another weather station. But I mean, the bottom line is that it didn't rain that night. Rain is not relevant in terms of what happened to Kylie. So Moonlight didn't help Kylie see because there was no moon. The moon had already set, and rain didn't make it tricky to drive or wash away tire marks because there was no rain whatsoever, certainly based on this information. So where does that leave us? So what do you think is going to be the next? So we've spoken about moon and rain. What do you think is going to be the next thing we're going to talk about? What do you think this is about? So this image over here, let's do that. Can I maybe blow that up? So this image over here is from the accident off the highway where the Uber couple perished, right? They ended up down here somewhere, right? That's what this picture is all about. This picture is obviously, you know where that is. This is right beside the reservoir, right? Now, just in a very basic way, imagine you in kindergarten. What is the same between this image and that image? What's the same? Again, Occam's razor. What's the same in this image and that image? Any thoughts? Rick Borum says, I'm almost to the point of leaning towards that this is all a complex hoax. Rick, you must be a Occam's razor rebel. Farm Girl says light showers are not measured. No, they are. They definitely are. Even if it's like a fraction of an inch, it definitely does measure it. Cal Girl says terrain. No, I'm not thinking about terrain. Winsome Hunter says Alan Gregory talks about tree markers. Yeah, that's the answer. Dark. It's dark. It's dark. Whatever happened here happened in the dark, and whatever happened here happened in the dark. Is there anybody who thinks what happened to Kylie happened in the middle of the day? Cal Girl, that's also quite a good point, says steep slopes. But that is the main point, darkness, right? And so that is the fifth clue that we all missed. Occam's razor suggests that the simplest explanation is the best, while the most obvious explanation for why the Uber couple perished wasn't because the road was bumpy. Not because the road was bumpy, they were driving on the highway. It wasn't because they got lost, they were on the road. It wasn't because anyone was driving drunk. The Uber crash occurred basically because it was dark. They were driving at night and somehow underestimated the side of the road or the speed they were going, or both. Has that ever happened in the history of car accidents? That someone driving at night they didn't realize how fast they were driving, or they didn't realize they were kind of leaving the road. Has that ever happened in the history of car accidents? Well, if that happened here, couldn't it have happened here? So Kylie, we know, probably didn't have to be incredibly intoxicated to make a similar mistake. So far, those who have physically redriven her route say even sober, it's a tricky and dangerous drive. Why? Because you can't tell exactly where, up to here, no further. You can't tell where you should really not continue driving. So again, what do the Uber crash and the accident in Prosser Lake have in common? Both occurred late at night. Not at night, late at night. People make mistakes, just as most of us did in trying to figure out what happened here. Kylie thought she knew her way around the reservoir, just as we think we know our way around missing persons cases. Now, after we conclude with this, I'm going to talk to you guys about a mistake I made this evening where I saw something and I couldn't really explain what it was. So I'm gonna come back to that. Just where at night you can't see something, and so you end up making a mistake. Now, when you're driving, especially if you're driving quite fast, and the terrain around you's treacherous or tricky or something like that, the speed you're going can get you into a lot of trouble. So I think Kylie thought she knew her way around the reservoir, just as the Uber couple thought they knew where they were going on the highway. They didn't see any threat, and so that's what the fifth clue is. That it was pitch dark when one accident happened, and pitch dark when Kylie disappeared. So isn't the reason for both accidents one and the same? In the darkness, late at night, tired, perhaps not concentrating, perhaps not driving cautiously, perhaps driving too fast, the driver made a mistake and left the road. So you may say, I'm not terribly happy with this explanation. It's not sexy enough. It's kind of boring. It's kind of not obvious, is obvious, but it's kind of, yeah, it's like, really? That's it? That is what happened here? So I did go to a law website that deals with car accidents. So again, getting statistics to see what the lawyers talk about. Sleuth and Sandal says both vehicles dropped out of sight over an incline. Yeah. Okay, so let me try and bring up that website. It's this one, right? It's a injury, personal injury lawyers, and I'm just trying to find the relevant area. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it. Practice areas, car accidents. So there we go. What causes car accidents? So again, I don't know if you guys noticed. I'm not. I'm not kind of assuming. Oh, so I've now got enough information. It was dark. That's what happened. You're still in the scout mindset, right? Where you say, okay, so generally, what do these experts say? What do the lawyers say that deal with this all the time? What causes car accidents like most of the time? And how many of those things can we cross off the list here or are relevant, right? So, according to Buckingham Barrera Vega law firm, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, sorry, they say 94% of all motor vehicle crashes in the United States are caused by driver error, which comes out to a little over 2 million accidents. I don't know if is that per year? Is that, not quite sure over what period. In other words, driver error is basically the main reason why people crash, not because the tire was flat or the engine misfired or because aliens landed. It's because of a human being who made a mistake, right? A human being who made a mistake. Freckle says poor visibility. So is poor visibility a factor here? Is poor visibility a factor where Kylie was driving in like total darkness? Wasn't any ambient lighting. There wasn't any moon to guide her. There were no street lights. Was that a factor in her taking wrong turns? There's also no signage. Was that a factor in her taking wrong turns late at night and ending up going the wrong way and ultimately going into the water? If you're driving at night over relatively unfamiliar terrain and you can't kind of see very clearly and it's late and you're tired, could something happen? Yeah, so exactly. I was also quite astonished. 94%. 94%, I mean, it's basically saying pretty much all accidents are due to human driver error, not other things, right? So what are the most common driver errors, right? So let's go back to this site. Anyway, let's take that away. What are the most common driver errors? Well, I've listed them in order of priority here. Maybe I should just put this over here. Can you guys see that? Intoxication, fatigue, texting, talking on the phone, looking at a GPS, speeding, adjusting the radio. But definitely these two, and the fact that that ping was on Snapchat, where is it now? What happened to that ping? Is it this one? No. Sorry, I don't know what I did with that ping. I don't know what I did with it. Anyway. Well, I just don't see it anyway. Anyway, you guys know what I was talking about. Could it be here? There we go. Could she have been Snapchatting at the time that this happened? If you think about texting or talking on the phone, could Kylie have been somewhat on the phone when this happened? In other words, it is dark, but making it worse is she's looking at a bright light on her phone, which is blinding her even further, right? Sleuth and Sandal says, I think those two combined, alcohol and messages. Yeah, that's it. So in almost half of all collisions, the problem is simply poor perception. Late at night, driving while intoxicated on a rough road, we know first that Kylie took a wrong turn, so we know for a fact that her surveillance was poor. Then she followed the road into the reservoir again, not so much because her surveillance was poor, but because it was difficult to see in the dark where the road was going and what it was doing. This is what she saw. There's very little to kind of go on there. You know, it's pretty difficult. And if you're driving at even a slow speed, you are going to struggle to appreciate how the road is kind of evolving. So this is the final point. And this is again from this website, from Buckingham Barrera Vega Law Firm. Recognition errors account for 41% of these human error car accidents. That's almost half of them. Recognition errors are driver inattention, internal distractions, external distractions, and inadequate surveillance. Now, you would imagine inadequate surveillance is just not looking at the road carefully enough or with enough alertness. And doesn't that explain what we're talking about here? Recognition errors, isn't that what Kylie failed to do? Pauline says, like Werner said, many accidents happen with new drivers within a year or so of getting your driver's license. I'm one of them. Although I wasn't driving when I was in this accident, I was with someone who'd just gotten his license. And then I had another very close call shortly after that. So it happens all the time. I don't know why it's got to be a big conspiracy. So does that make sense? The fifth clue that we all missed was that it was just dark. And that was why Kylie had an accident. With all the other factors, but also it was dark. Again, if you say, sorry, that's just too simplistic. You say Occam's razor is the simplest solution, but then that explains what happened with the Uber couple kind of the same day. So it applies to them, but not to Kylie. Zircon said, the only accident I've had was at 16. Well, good for you. That is some kind of achievement. Yeah, it's not sexy, that's for sure. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of come back to what I spoke about at the beginning. So I took Timmy for a walk this evening, much later than we normally do, and it was dark, and it was sort of the last half an hour of dusk, but like there wasn't like a ruby glow. It was really pretty dark. You could sort of make out a couple of clouds here and there, but yeah, it was pretty dark. And I was circling back to complete the walk, and I saw this string of lights in the sky, something I'd never seen before in my life. And I was like, that kind of looks like a train in the sky. I mean, it's a straight line. The lights weren't twinkling, so it wasn't like a meteor that was breaking up in like little blocks. And so my first thought was, can that actually be an aeroplane? You know, a Boeing or some kind of airline. And I'm kind of literally seeing the windows. But I mean, I would have to admit, I've never seen that before in my life. I've never seen a jet flying over me, and I'm like, oh, there are the little windows going by, right? Yeah, no, Mad Mechanic, we'll get to that. So all I'm trying to say is, so this is a test of my perception, but also the scout mindset, right? So it's a simple test. You're seeing something in the dark. Do you know what it is? And how quickly are you making up your mind and what's the word, ending that whole investigation, right? So my thought was that can only be like a jet. Although I've seen jets in my life, and that, where I was walking, I've seen jets fly over, but never this low. And then, so my next thought was, again, using your perception, was if that is a jet, surely I'd be able to hear the jet, right? Wouldn't that make sense? And so I thought, can I hear anything? And I sort of stopped and I listened. And to be honest, I did hear that sort of scrawl noise that jets make, but I couldn't be certain that it wasn't cars driving not that far away. And I thought, that's odd, because this jet, if I can see those lights so clearly, it can't be that far away that you can barely make out the sound of the jet. I mean, normally a jet's quite far away and it makes quite a loud noise, right? But then if it's not a jet, what other possible explanation could it be? I did think of space debris or a satellite or something like that, but the fact that it was so long was like, there's no way that that's a satellite or a space station or something like that. And then the light seemed to just disappear, sort of. And so I thought maybe it was an aeroplane that turned, and then that's why you now can't see the lights. And then I also thought, why are there no flashing lights? Bear in mind, this happened at night. So if I can see the windows of the airplane, why can you not see the wing lights flashing, which you always can? And so I basically dismissed it to, okay, so this is South Africa. That was not roadworthy and not very airworthy airplane, right? And but I was still like, cheapest. That was like a UFO. Like, it doesn't seem like it was a jet, but if it wasn't a jet, what was it, right? And of course, you want to not be uncertain about it. And the answer is yes, it was Starlink. This is what I saw. Let's just bring that up. That is what I saw. There's another example of it. And here's an article about it. No, these aren't UFOs. Is there another one here? Play that. That's exactly what I saw. And like, if you've never seen that before, what are you going to think that is? Remember, I said it looked like a train in the sky. Remember? Crazy, isn't it? So when I told some friends of mine about this, they said, did you have your phone with you? And I didn't. And so it's one of those things where it's almost like, well, were you imagining something? No, 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 I really did see something that looked like a train in the sky. Okay. Well, I've never seen something like that. So I think you may be imagining things. But can you see how the whole idea when you investigate something, you must think critically, but you must also not rush to say, you know, it's that. I mean, with enough thinking about it, I don't think I would have ever come up with Starlink. It's because of you guys knowing about it that I know about it. But I mean, I was going to say to you, the closest thing it could have been is a jet plane, but it didn't have any of the other symptoms. It didn't roar like a jet. It didn't have the flashing lights, which you know, obviously I was right in thinking that way. And I've never seen a jet with windows like that in my life. I've never sort of looked up, oh, there's a jet flying by. So my mind is creating that bias for it being a jet because it's the most likely thing. But it turns out the most likely thing isn't the most likely thing. Does that make sense? In other words, if you don't know all the information, you think the most likely thing is your Occam's razor, but that's because of incomplete information. So don't be afraid to assume that you don't know something. So that's one of the ways you get on the right track is not by saying this had to be a jet, where you say, you know what, I don't know what I saw, I can't explain it. But you then say it was a UFO. It's a this is you know I actually found signs of extraterrestrial life. Wow, you know, I guess I'm going to be on CNN. No, you saw something that is actually not that weird in the 21st century. See if I can put up another photo of it, a better photo. But I think you guys get the idea. And I just thought that that was a really timely analogy for what we're talking about. Is where it's dark, you can't see so well, and so you make assumptions and that end up being wrong. I mean, I was wrong. It wasn't a jet. That's how easily you can be wrong at night, right? Yeah, a UFO isn't necessarily an alien. Joan of Arc says that's Starlink. Yeah, yeah, no, that is what it is. Cue the logical song. Shady Boji says, I still don't feel it was an accident 100%. Well, we're going to find out. I mean, we'll find out one way or another. Yeah, it was nighttime. So of the 5 clues, bear in mind the 5th one is based on hindsight. Which one do you think is the most compelling? Do you think it's number 1, the phone going off, the phone apparently being turned off? We're not going to deal with number 2 because that didn't apply. Do you think it was number 3, which dealt with, was it isolation? Number 4, the ping from the Snapchat, or this one, that the darkness is actually quite an important reason for what happened? Which one do you think is the most important of the 5? So let me have a look at your, so 31% voted number 4. Well, they're all pretty close. They all are definitely pretty close. So I'm going to quickly take you through some of these images. These are, let's just bring that up. These are just from Weather Underground. You can see this is wind. That's for the 7th. I couldn't find any day that it rained. So that's the 7th. That's the 9th. That's the 10th. That's the part you need to look into. That's the 11th. That is the 12th. That's the 13th. That's the 15th. That's the 16th. 17th. So the first time it rained was the 17th that I could find. Right? The first time I could find that it rained, there you can see Truckee Tahoe Station. A little bit of rain. It's the only rain that I could find. That is the 5th, no rain, the 5th, and there's the 6th, also no rain. And this article is from the 24th, I believe. So the last thing I want to show you guys is something a little bit different. So those of you who are interested in the Kylie Rodney case, it has a lot of similarities with Gabby Petito, certainly in terms of the victim. And I want to deal with something that you probably aren't going to see on another true crime channel, which is how do we deal with grief? And I'm talking about how do the families deal with the grief of losing their children? How do you deal with grief, or how should you deal with grief in terms of, millions of people died during the pandemic, some related directly to it, some indirectly. How should one grieve? And it's a question that I want to take from these cases, but also in a more broad sense. What is the right way to grieve? And I think it's also something that we as the true crime community need to think about. We are weighing in on these cases. These are real lives, real people. What is the right way to really approach this whole topic? But I think just the idea of grief is something that is quite hard to navigate. One thing I will tell you is grieving is a learning experience, right? And you've got to be, and it's a process. So you've got to be open to that whole process. So possibly tomorrow, I'll be putting up not a live stream, it'll be an episode dealing with the science of grief. And I hope it's going to be of use to some of you. If you haven't watched the tribute to Gabby Petito, those of you interested in Kylie Rodney, please do have a look at it. Because I do talk about Kylie Rodney in that tribute as well. It talks to the American story, and you will be more familiar with this. When I deal with the science of grief, you'll be more familiar with the subject matter if you do have a look at that. So that's something I want to sort of touch on in the next episode, dealing with sort of the subject matter. So yeah, that is it from my side. We are still awaiting the investigative report, and we are awaiting the toxicology. What is quite interesting in the Alec Baldwin saga, a lot of that information has just come out now, almost a year after the fact. I don't know whether, with Kylie Rodney being a minor, I don't know whether we're going to see that information ultimately. Sleuth and Sandals, great series of shows, Nick. Thanks for keeping it real. Thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to keep this short. So I'm going to just take in a couple of questions up until, say, an hour 30. Oh, that's really, I'm sorry to see that SW Firefly says, I'm still grieving the loss of my daughter 2 years ago. Yeah. Kathy says there are 5 things of grief, anger, acceptance. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is a process. Definitely is a process. Why be so nosy? Says my daughter was 21 and killed in 2018 by an alleged friend. Sentencing is in September. I still have horrific days and others are more tolerable. Sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. Sure. Shame. Supermum says, how long will we have to wait for some confirmation? It's difficult to say. I think we will know about the accident report earlier. Some people say it'll be confidential. Some say it won't be released. Tim says, I think it was foul play, but don't bash anyone for thinking otherwise. That's thank you. Sunflower says, grief changes over time, but never really ends. Yeah, we are sorry about that. I think a lot of people in the true crime community are dealing with their own traumas, in almost in an indirect way. Do you guys agree with that? Yeah, we are living in an age of conspiracy theories. Ryle Nick says, I would like to do the poll, but have no idea what each clue is. I'm not going to go through it again. I'm not going to. Let me just quickly review it. So, number one was the phone, but not the ping. It was the phone going off. Number two was the rules at the Prosser campground. Number three, meaning being the reason for everyone leaving at the same time. The third one was that Kylie was isolated and that her home circumstances and her connections with kids being different played into the circumstances. Number four was her social media, that she was on a Snapchat ping at 12:30. That's the ping, by the way. Number four was, number five is that it was dark. And that's the clue that we all missed. So I hope that helped you, Ralnix. Everyone has an opinion, okay. I don't believe that Dank Bud's saying it's going to drag on and on. I think we will know. I think because it's the public interest is such. I think we will know. Yeah. I'm also someone who believes that people say, we'll never know what really happened here. I feel the opposite. That given enough time, we can know very well what happened in a particular situation. Yeah, so everyone who's going through grief and trauma, look out for this episode tomorrow. It sounds like it's quite impersonal, but it's actually going to be quite meaningful and I think touching. So make sure you don't miss that. It's not going to be live. It'll just come up sometime tomorrow. Okay, so that's it from me. I'm not going to go beyond an hour and a half. Thanks very much, guys, for making it here. And again, thanks, mods, for being here at pretty short notice. Thanks for the members who are here, all the regulars from the True Crime Rocket Science community. I see there are a couple of new members as well. And then obviously all the new subscribers, welcome to this community. I've definitely had a tough 2 weeks for lots of different reasons. At the beginning of the 2 weeks, I was in a relationship. By the end of this case, I'm now single again. So I've definitely had some tough behind the scenes stuff to deal with. But yeah, there's some aspects that are definitely bummers for me, but other aspects that are where things are improving. So, that's life, I guess. But yeah, in a way, I'm sort of relieved that this case that sort of was like a gathering storm has sort of, to some extent, blown over. But we'll see what lies in the aftermath of all this. Ronald says, I say all five have an impact. Okay, guys, so that's it from me. I just want you to, take care. Remember the scout mindset in true crime. Stay curious. Don't assume you know, assume you don't know, right? And so enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay.